Today's podcast is Avoiding Legal Pitfalls, a guide for expats here in Spain. And I'm delighted to be joined by two of our lawyers who have a wealth of experience dealing and acting for expats. So I've got Rocio and Leticia both here at Knockholes Lawyers Spain. Look, I can see why so many British people flock to your wonderful country with the super weather, the cuisine, the culture, and of course are very happy here. But of course it's a different country with a different legal system. So today what I wanted to do is have a discussion, what are the major pitfalls and the issues that you find British people have when they settle here in Spain. So Rocio, if I can ask you first of all, why do legal mistakes happen for expats?
Well, hello. Well, first of all, I think that legal mistakes happen because some clients tend to think that things work the same way here as they do in their own country. So sometimes they think that works like for example, purchasing a property will go the same way as it goes in the UK, and here the system is completely different. The bureaucracy is different, and sometimes they are like, "But yeah, you don't do the things this way." And I said, "No, we are in Spain. This is different." So yeah, sometimes you have to explain that they have to be patient and they have to trust our advice that things will go different. Also, of course, the language barrier.
Sure.
We speak a different language, we have a different culture, and sometimes these differences, you can see them. And sometimes they had misinformation. They have read online information that is not correct or is not updated. So that can lead to some pitfalls or some issues that will give you maybe troubles in the future that you can avoid at the beginning.
That's great. I mean, let's start looking at what are the potential pitfalls here in Spain for expats. And if I can start with you, Leticia, on wills and inheritance, because I can imagine lots of British people, some may sell up and come over, but they have an English will. But then they come over to Spain, they buy a property, they have assets, and may not have a will. I mean, what's your experience? What are the big challenges for expats when it comes to wills and inheritance?
Yes, well, not having an Spanish will can lead to unnecessary delays, complications, additional costs for your estate in Spain. Your assets can be subject to Spanish inheritance rules, which means that it can be less flexible than your personal wishes. So in that case, it's highly recommended to have, when you have assets in Spain, such as property, whole bank accounts, or you would like to have all your assets well organized, it's very advisable to have a Spanish will to avoid any problem like double transaction, probate delays, or, for example, family disputes. In this case, if you have assets both in Spain and the UK, it's very important that they work together, your Spanish will and the UK will, to avoid any contradictions between them.
So just so I'm clear, if I am an expat and I have an English will my assets and my property be covered in the English will, or do I need specifically to have a Spanish will and an English will?
It's more recommendable to do a Spanish will. It's more cost effective and it will be more clear for your inheritance in the future in Spain.
Okay, because if I don't have the Spanish will, I mean, I've heard about forced heirship, and what does that mean?
Yes, that means that Spanish rules are more strict. And for example, if you want to give your assets to your husband, and if you have child, you have to respect his or their rights. So if you don't grant your Spanish will, and the Spanish law can be applied in that sense, even if you have done a will, but only in the UK.
If I then make a Spanish will, can I avoid the forced heirship?
Yes, you can.
So that's in effect the biggest advantage, really, because
Yes.
my understanding is that in the UK you have a lot more autonomy,
Yeah.
where in Spain it's far more restrictive. So I suppose one of the benefits of having a Spanish will is that you can ensure that who you want to leave your assets to
Definitely.
can be dealt with. Okay, interesting. Tell me, Rithia, more. I mean, one of the reasons people come to to Spain is to buy property, and again, it's a bit of a minefield for anybody coming over to Spain or any other country where it's very different. What, from your experience, what are the major pitfalls or the mistakes that British or expats make when buying property? What they should do that they're not doing?
Yeah. Well, the most important is not to do a due diligence when buying a property in Spain. A due diligence is very important because if you don't do it, you can discover problems in the future that you didn't know about. For example, there can be outstanding debts on the property, the title was not clear, the property was not registered properly, or imagine that there is a sanction pending on the property because it was built without a license, this kind of stuff. So it's very important that before buying a property, the due diligence is made, and to avoid problems in the future, or if there is any problem that you found, you can solve it before buying the property. For example, if there is a debt, it can be paid. The seller can pay it in advance, or you can pay it from the price, and then you avoid problems in the future that will give you headache if you don't solve them on time.
So, from your experience, I mean, what's the sequence of events? Should people find the property and then instruct a lawyer, or should they instruct the lawyer from the outset to assist in finding the property?
Yeah, it depends. Some people have a lawyer before buying the property, before finding the property, and some other find the property first and then look for a lawyer to accompany them in the process. Both are fine as long as you hire the lawyer before buying the property. You can find the property, go to your lawyer and say, look, I found this property. Would you help me with the process? And then we start our due diligence and check that the property is, everything is in order.
Give me some idea of just in a nutshell, it's the process of buying a property in Spain. What does one do? What's the general process when buying a property in Spain?
Well, the general process would be that you find a property and you sign a reservation document to book it, to keep off the property off the market. And during this time, your lawyer would do the due diligence, request the documents that you need for example, your NI number, a bank account. And once the due diligence is done, everything is in order. We have checked that the property is fine, in good condition, you can go ahead. Then a private contract will be signed, you will pay a deposit, and the final step will be the completion document, which is signed before a notary.
Okay. And in the UK, all our properties are registered now at the land registry. Does that happen here in Spain as well?
Yes, we have a land registry. We also have another registry, which is the Catastro. But the land registry is the one you can find the main information about the property, square meters, where it's located, the owner, if there are any charters or lines on the property, you can find it in the land registry.
And what taxes, when buying a property, what taxes do you pay here in Spain?
Yeah, so when you buy a property in Spain, the taxes that you pay, second hand, for example, is a transfer tax, which in Andalusia is 7%. And if you buy a new property, you pay the IVA, which is the VAT, which is at 10%, and also the stamp duty tax, which in Andalusia is 1.2%.
Sure. You mentioned earlier one of the reasons why to undertake due diligence is that undiscovered debts or unclear titles. Is that quite common in Spain?
Yes, it can happen, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for example, that there is an EB debt that, for example, the owner has not paid the last EB received, or there is a mortgage on the property that needs to be paid out before buying the property. This is quite
so
common.
if you actually purchase the property and those debts have not been discharged, does that mean that you're responsible for those debts?
Yes, you can be. You're responsible.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we've talked about wills, talked about property. Of course, one of the big things for expats is residency and immigration, especially in a post-Brexit world. I mean, from your experience, what are the challenges that expats have when it comes to residency and immigration generally?
Yes, but sometimes they don't have in mind the 90 days rules.
Okay, just refresh your memory what the
Yeah.
90-day rule is.
You can spend here only 90 days as a tourist in 6 months. So after that period, you have to become resident and obtaining a visa to stay here.
Okay. And what happens if you go beyond that 90 days? If you don't leave the country?
You are here irregularly.
Okay.
illegally. Yeah.
And what are the consequences of that?
Fines, administrative issues. You cannot access to public health care. So it's
Okay.
important. It's very serious
So
consequences.
if you're planning to stay over 90 days within a 180-day period, you need a visa. So what visas, from your experience, do most expats apply for?
It depends of the person. Each circumstances has their kind of visa. So, for example, if you are retired and you would like to stay here, you have the option to obtain a non-lucrative visa. But on the other hand, for example, if you work remotely, you can apply for a digital nomad visa.
Okay. Rocio, we touched on earlier taxes and finances, and you mentioned that when you buy a property, there are certain obligations to pay taxes. From your experience, I mean, how do expats deal? Is the taxation system over here very different to the UK? And what challenges do you find that lots of expats face?
Well, I think the challenge that I see the most is that you have to pay taxes when you buy the property, but you have to pay taxes afterwards as well. Even though you don't use the property or you don't rent it, you have to pay taxes just for being an owner.
Okay.
So some people are not aware of that, or they don't know when they have to file their taxes. So sometimes they miss the deadlines, they find penalties or they find sanctions. So yeah, you have to be aware that when you become an owner of a property in Spain, you need to pay taxes yearly. For example, you have to pay the IBI, you have to pay the non-resident income tax, and yeah, the expenses of the property, for example, community of owners.
Okay. And do you pay is there an obligation to pay taxes just to live here as well, like a community charge?
Well, the community charges for the property. The property pays, if, for example, if the property is in a complex, you have to pay community fees just to maintain the common areas in a proper way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And if you sell the property, I mean, in the UK we have capital gains. Is that applicable here in Spain as well?
Yes, yes. We have the capital gain tax as well. As a non-resident, you pay it in Spain when you sell your property. You have to be aware of as well of the double treaty taxation.
Sure.
But probably we have a double taxation treaty with the UK, so you can deduct the taxes that you have paid here in the UK.
Okay.
For the capital gain tax.
How does that work then? So if do you have to pay tax in both countries? Or how does that work? If you're an expat living in Spain, you may have income back in the UK. How does that work on a practical level?
Well, for example, if you have to pay the capital gain tax in the UK for the property that you have sold in Spain,
yeah,
you also are paying capital gain tax in here. So you might be able to deduct the tax that you have paid here from the tax that you're going to pay in the UK for the same concept.
Okay. Leticia, I think one of the things that, again, I know expats have to do is have a power of attorney. What's the purpose of the power of attorney?
Yes. In this context, it's important to distinguish between power of attorney and lasting power of attorney,
okay,
because some people are confused. So power of attorney is a general document, legal document, that allows you to to authorize somebody to act on your behalf. Normally, it's limited to a scope or time, and its validity will cease if you lose your mental capacity.
Okay.
A lasting power of attorney, on the other hand, is also a legal document, but is even valid if you lose your mental capacity. And it involves financial issues, health, and care conditions. So it's important to give it to a trusted person or a family member. In both cases, lawyers can handle the matter and can prepare, draft the power of attorney on your behalf, and to see that everything is well prepared. And a normal power of attorney is for obtaining a NIE number, to represent you purchasing a property, for inheritance matters. And on the other hand, the lasting power of attorney, as I told you, is more like for take care of your personal
affairs.
issues. Yeah.
Is it necessary that expats have a power of attorney?
It's necessary if you are not living here and you can grant your power of attorney from your home country or in Spain.
Sure.
So if you give a power of attorney to a lawyer, he can represent you from the very beginning of a transaction, for example.
Sure. One of the things I think that distinguishes the legal system in the UK compared to Spain is the role of the notary. Because in the UK we have notaries, but they're just to authorise documents. But here, the notary has a far more important role in the legal system. Can you just, Theo, just tell us what the role of the notary is?
Well, here the notary is a public officer, and here we do the major transactions are done before a notary, so it gives security to the transaction. For example, if you purchase a property, the completion document is signed before him or her. Our inheritance deed is also signed before him, a power of attorney. So it gives the document a kind of security that was done properly, that the notary has checked that the person has the capacity and he knows what he's signing. So it makes the transaction proper.
Okay. One of the things I suspect expats may not do is get legal advice early. And, you mentioned earlier they'll go online and the information may not be correct. So, from your own experience with Theo, I mean, kind of like, what are the challenges have you found when people don't get the legal advice they should do early enough, and what potentially are the consequences for that?
Well, I always say that it's better to prevent problems than to solve problems. So it is, I always recommend to hire a lawyer at the very beginning when you go to a different country, when you don't know how things work. So they can assist you to avoid any problem in the future. For example, in property purchase or taxation, they will keep you informed. They will remind you when you have to file your taxes. They will check that your property is in order, that everything is in order, so you don't miss deadlines, you don't receive fines, you don't get sanctions. So it will prevent for you to have problems in the future.
Sure. And we've talked about the potential pitfalls when the need to have a Spanish will to avoid the forced heirship and to make sure your affairs here, the due diligence, the need to get residency and immigration and to pay taxes. From your experience, I mean, what are the top tips to expats to avoid legal pitfalls and to make sure that they follow the law, so to speak?
My recommendation would be to find a reputable lawyer they can trust. Because at the end, it will be a long-term relationship with your lawyer. Somebody that it is approachable, that you have any doubt, you have any question, that you will make sure that this person will help you in your stay in Spain. If you come and finally live here, you will then become confident with the system. But at the beginning, I will advise to hire somebody who can assist you in the process.
Great.
And also with experience in expat-related issues.
Exactly,
Sure.
of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Theo, Leticia, thank you so much for your time today.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.